All right, I don't have a clicker, so I'm going to have to awkwardly walk over to my laptop every once in a while. But I'm here today to talk to you guys about deleted evidence and, more importantly, evidence of deleted files and things. I guess that's a little more accurate. And we're going to go on this journey together to fill in the map to Luke Skywalker. You may pick up on the theme of this talk. I'd also like to thank you all for being here because at 2 of 11, there were 4 people here. So I'd like to give those people a big shout out for sticking through it, and then the rest of you who came in late, I love you too. So who am I? I'm Dave Pany. I'm a senior consultant at Mandiant, a FireEye company. I graduated from Bloomsburg in 2013. I do forensics for the big APT, financial cases. I like to call it espionage, whatever, that sounds fun, but I've done a couple neat cases like that, healthcare. I like Python. I'm not a coder. I'm not a good coder. I write terrible code, but my goal is easy to use. So on your end, you think it's good code, even though it's really terrible. That's all I care about. Yes, I do work for FireEye. Who was at the keynote earlier? Yeah, FireEye, big money, drives fancy cars. I drive a Kia, so it's a nice Kia, but I just want to set the stereotype straight that the sales guys have the big money. Us consultants, we just do the work and then they get all the money. So, are we going to switch? Okay. Gonna change here 1 second. No problem. Do what you got to do. That one works. Can you guys hear me? Is it on? It's on? Okay. Great. Thank you so much. So I bet you guys, wanted to see the behind-the-scenes Bloomcon DVD that's coming out later. You just saw it happen. This is, real life going on right now. So I'm Dave. I'd also like to give a shout-out to Mary Singh, my co-worker, who co-wrote this presentation with me, and I presented it with her before. She's not here today, but I'd like to thank her for all the hard work she put into this. So what we're going to talk about, attackers create files, bad guys create files. They also delete some files sometimes. We hear a lot of talks, and that's why we have jobs, right? The attackers don't like to leave their stuff around, so we have to try and find what they left or hanging around inadvertently. We'll talk about the artifacts that get created just because a file exists or just because it gets created. Then we're going to talk about artifacts that get created when a user or an attacker accesses a file, executes a file, maybe some other application accesses a file like antivirus, some built-in Windows stuff. That'll be pretty cool. So a lot of these artifacts may be hanging around, and you'll be able to find them to show, yes, this file did exist on the system. We just had a talk before that mentioned one about shell bags. That's a great example of a file that's no longer there, but you have evidence of it. These are some other cool tactics. No shell bags in my talk. I apologize if you just really love shell bags. Okay, so why would a file be deleted? I have an interesting perspective. I know a lot of students at Bloomsburg, they want to graduate and work in law enforcement where it's a user. I'll tend to use the word attacker because that's how we describe it. It's like some guy coming to your computer with a knife. That's what I was scared to say attacker at first because that's what I thought everyone was going to picture. But it's Russia, China, whoever. I don't know. I just find what they did. I don't determine who did it. That's a whole other department. But bad guys will like to, if they're installing malware or a virus, they don't want that to hang out there forever for me to find, so they may tell the virus to uninstall or delete itself, so it's harder to find. They'll say, hey, I'm probably going to be done with this in a week, so let's use it for a week, and then it'll blow itself up, no problem. The attacker will manually delete their files. They may just be on the command line, through a backdoor, or if they're on Linux, they'll be SSH'd into a system or something. Let's run a del command, that's no problem. If they're on the system through RDP, anyone familiar with RDP? So RDP is just like logging on to a computer over the network. You have the full desktop, and you can click and drag and drop and all that fun stuff. If you delete something that way, it's a good chance it could go into the recycle bin if they don't permanently delete it with a shift delete or something. So you may want to check your recycle bin, and you'll be parsing info too and using Refusi, all that good stuff that you'll learn here. But there are different ways that attackers can manually delete files. Another big one is antivirus. Everybody loves antivirus. Some people say antivirus is dead. I say long live antivirus. It's probably going to be around even if it transforms into next generation antivirus and gets super deep learning machine computer algorithms. I'm not sure what it's going to do. But antivirus does some really great things that we'll talk about later. And also, anyone know what happens if antivirus doesn't delete a file? It may do something else. Quarantine a file. Yeah, so it will, encrypt that file or encode it or something in a way that it's not deleted, so you can still try and recover it. Do you know how to decrypt it or decode it? That's a whole other question. Every antivirus does it differently. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. But that's something that can be useful. And we have attackers and our red team and hacker guys. They'll go in, and if their tool gets picked up by antivirus, they'll just pop out another version. They'll try different encoding. They'll do some obfuscation to try and get around that antivirus, and they'll keep going until it works sometimes. So that's why files get deleted and how they get deleted. If you didn't notice, my slide transitions are very particular about why they're those ways. So just a little Easter egg. So can you recover deleted files? I remember back in the day when I came to Bloomsburg, I was sitting in Ben Franklin. Garrett was there with me, and one of the students deleted a file on a flash drive or a floppy disk, said, look, it's gone, and then opened it up in HXD and found it. That blew my mind. That's when I decided to come here. It's like a really simple story, but it means a lot to me. But the whole point is, yes, deleted files can be recovered. That's why we have work here that, looking for artifacts, and hopefully we can get the files. But it's going to depend, right? How was that file deleted? Was it shift deleted, or was it sent to the recycle bin? Recycle bin is going to be a little easier to delete. If you shift delete a file, it won't go to the recycle bin. You'll have to carve that out or find the MFT record yourself, look for the data runs. Do a little bit more manual approach. That's going to depend on how much activity is going on that drive or that volume. If it's an operating system volume, lots of other files are going to be overwriting the unallocated space. It's more likely than not, or than on other systems that that file in unallocated space will be overwritten. You'll be able to get chunks of it, fragments. It's going to depend on your disk hardware. Is the disk very small or full? If not, that unallocated space is going to be circled through more frequently. If it's solid state, it's going to do wear leveling, and all kinds of fragmentation might make it more tricky. So there's a lot of, it's an art and a science combined. So there's a lot of factors. Sometimes you can get it, sometimes you can't. But if you can't recover a file, which in my day job, we rarely, attackers are getting really good at deleting their files and cleaning up with anti-forensics techniques. We rarely get to recover files unless we get lucky sometimes these days. But we find all kinds of other artifacts that we're going to talk about that show you that a file was present on the system. And if we're really lucky, some artifacts even record a hash value of that file. Does anybody know why a hash value would be important? What's that? So, like to authenticate what that file was? Exactly. So if we find a certain MD5 or Amcache, we'll do a SHA-1 hash. We can say, oh, this was the hash of the file, and we know exactly what that file was if we've recovered a version of it previously from another case. I don't think that the files we look at make it into the NSRL. And also, no, we don't. We have our own intelligence repositories that we keep track of these. I've never used NSRL. Has anybody used it? I assume it's
a list of known good or known boring hashes.
Yeah, so like, and attackers change their tools so frequently. I've never used it. I know you can put hash lists and encase and stuff.
It would let you know, like, if an attacker had replaced a good file with a bad version.
Gotcha.
The good version may be in the NSRL. If the attacker changes it, it wouldn't be.
Interesting. Okay.
It's normally for forensic where they're looking at stuff.
Gotcha. So I think the moral is if you have like a list of hashes that you know what those files are, that can be great. Even if you don't have the file, you can say, yes, this was bad. Yes, this was good. No, let's not worry about it. Something like that. So why, what artifacts happen when a file gets created? This is probably the most intimidating group of people to present that to, because you guys, hopefully, when you hit these classes, should know this stuff in and out, and I'll mention that. So please call me out if I'm wrong. I hope I'm not. It's been a while since I've done the cool stuff. Who's opened an MFT and X-Ways and looked at the cool little sections, the different colors? But have you ever seen the MFT attributes described as a lightsaber? I bet you haven't. X-Ways doesn't do that. That's only here. So if an NTFS, and let's keep in mind the NTFS file system is separate than Windows. Windows just uses it in recent versions of Windows. There's talks of replacing it with REFS, redundant, and whatever. But it used to use FAT 30-something. But for NTFS, that's the big dog in the house. The metadata and the file system files will be $. They'll look pretty expensive. A lot of us have heard of the $MFT file. We'll have the $USN journal, $extend directory. We'll talk about $I30s. But when the MFT, or when a file gets created, NTFS looks in the master file table and says, I'm going to take this 1,024 bytes of data, and I'm going to just say, hey, I have a file with these attributes. Every file will have a standard information attribute. That's your hex 10 attribute, which will have some timestamps. Then it'll also have a file name attribute. That'll have the file name itself with some other timestamps that we'll talk about. And then if your file is pretty small, the file contents will be resident in the MFT. It depends on how many other attributes there are. We say about 700 bytes, but if there's multiple file name attributes for a short file name, which some of you may or may not be familiar with, this amount of data left in that small section is small, so there's a higher chance that the file will be put out to disk, and the data attribute will have data runs which say, here's all my information, but if you want the actual contents of the file, go to this cluster and find it. So yeah, everyone loves to talk about resident files. So I don't find any interest in them other than if you're carving them. Hey, why is this file in the MFT? That's good to know, but they can be there. So you'll have your standard information and your file name attributes created. Let's say we delete a file and we're looking through the MFT here. Some things change. When we delete a file, we do a shift delete, or maybe, I'm not sure how the recycle bin works, but when we do like a shift delete or a command line delete, that MFT entry, the standard info and the file name attributes, they're still there. They just get marked as unused. Yes?
So how does that work with resident files? Is the content of the resident file overwritten when the entry is deleted or not?
No. So the entire contents of that 1,024 bytes of the MFT entry are just going to hang out there, but they'll be marked as inactive or unused, and that's how you would know that that file has been deleted. It's no longer active. But the contents of the attributes and the data, if it's resident, or the data runs pointing out, they're still going to hang out there until the MFT says, hey, we need a space for a new file. I see this one's inactive. Let's get rid of it. But until that gets overwritten, that entry is still going to be there, including the data itself. So yeah, the flag, right? So it's the rest is still there, pretty much untouched, right? Gotcha. Hard links confuse me a little bit. I don't deal with them a lot, but that's good to know. It's also good to know you guys have professors here who are smarter than everyone about some of this stuff. So that's how. Yeah. Yes. So the content is really there, preserved intact until the MFT or the file system decides we need to use this space for something else. So let's take a look at the green hand here. It used to be file known as green hand. It got deleted. MFT said, oh, I need new space. I'm going to put robot hand to where that entry was. So you cannot get those standard info and file name timestamps and data anymore because they've been overwritten. Whereas the blue hand here, it got deleted, but it's just hanging out as still deleted right now. We can go and recover that file metadata and maybe find out where the file was on disk if that hasn't been overwritten yet. All kinds of good stuff. If there are any questions, just shoot your hands up. I'll do my best. So this is an index record, which you guys may or may not be familiar with. This kind of takes it to the next level. When a file gets created, you get an MFT entry that has standard info, 4 timestamps in there. You get a file name attribute, 4 timestamps in there that may be different. So I'm not going to dig into why they're different, but keep this in mind. There are 8 timestamps for each file that gets created in NTFS. But then when you create a file, it's in a folder, right? That folder wants to say, hey, I need a list of what's in my folder. So that's when an index record is created. The folder is going to say, we'll give you the names of all the files and a copy of the standard information timestamps. So you'll be able to go find that other record. Keep in mind, it's the name with a copy of the standard information timestamp, so it's not 4 new or separate timestamps for a regular file that's still active and present on the system. It's no new timestamps, not going to be anything interested, but keep in mind they are there. Usually for files with lots of directories, the index record is stored in an MFT attribute that's non-resident, so it's moved out to disk, and you'll see this INDX. Has anybody ever opened up FTK Imager and seen a $I30 file? That's what it is. It's not really a file, it's just the attribute. They call it $I30 because these attributes can hold different kinds of data, but if Windows says the data is $I30, it is a directory listing, and so Access Data calls it $I30 file, but keep in mind the file doesn't really exist. It's just the attribute. So in this we can see we have editor at the bottom. I know it's small. And also these non-resident files, they grow and shrink and all kinds of good stuff, so it's a very good chance that they grow really big. When an attacker creates a 30-part RAR file, once they delete that, all those RAR files, it's going to shrink back up. Guess what happens to all the data that used to be there? It's still there. So you can use that tool, indexparse.py by my colleague, Willie Valentin, to carve out some of that data. You have to use the -D flag when you run that, but it's very useful. So you just go into Access or FTK Imager, right-click on the $I30 or an end case. When you click on a directory to show you this, and just export that, run the tool on that, and it'll tell you what is carved from slack space. Because those records are deleted, their MFT records may have been deleted as well. So even though it's just standard information timestamps, you're not going to get those anywhere else sometimes. So it's very useful. We use these all the time. Come on in. So, whoa. Hotline Bling swag. Everyone has their binoculars. I know I need my glasses. Don't worry about looking at this stuff. We'll zoom in a second. But we just looked at a non-resident index record. Here's an example of what it looks like in the MFT record itself. Usually, if it's resident, it'll be a 0x90 attribute. And if we look here, I have nice highlighted in red. It's not as fun as X-Ways one used to like tip the monitor back so you can see the very faint colors better. But it's the standard info, the file name, 2 file names here, which is cool. And then our 0x90 attribute with the $I30 indicator there. So that's telling us that this is a directory, and this attribute's going to have the names of the directories. Unfortunately, this one, we see an A0 and a B0 attribute, which is going to tell us that there's the index record is now non-resident, so we won't have those file names there. But if we get to the end, we see all these Fs, and you're like, F that, that's okay. Because after the end of the MFT record, signified by the 4 Fs, the 4 double Fs, we see some keywords here, shield.exe and cannons.exe. So that's interesting. So things to keep in mind as we dig into this is that it can be a resident attribute that then gets moved non-resident if the directory gets too big or resized, and the slack space past the end of an MFT entry is not overwritten if that data changes. The entire contents are only zeroed out if the entry is reused. Then it'll clear everything out, put a new entry in there. But if the attributes change size, that slack space may still be available. So let's take a zoomed. Oh, yes, I forgot about my awesome gifts. They're not mine. I don't own them. So let's take a closer look. We may have a keyword search for cannons. We know this is a bad file. It's not as cool as the file names that Brian was talking about over in his case, but these are fun too. You have your malware could be shield.exe. You take a look, and you see this. This one's not as apparent as the other timestamps, but anytime I see this block of like concentrated data with a file name underneath it, I kind of think of it as a set of 4 timestamps. So that may or may not stand out to you. That's okay. But we can see, cannons and shield.exe. Turns out that these are artifacts from a previously resident index record that is no longer there. So if we carve some of this stuff out and we know the structure of the index record file attributes, we can actually determine that shield.exe will trace back all the stuff above it, has those timestamps, that size, and we can determine it's an archive, anything you would get from a normal MFT entry. Unfortunately, Canon's timestamps were up here somewhere, and they're overwritten by the existing MFT entry, so we couldn't get that. But we know Canon, there was probably a file named Canons in that folder at some point in time, which may be useful. We don't know what the size was, what the timestamps were, but we know some stuff, so that's useful. We are very excited about that. So that is index records in a nutshell. We're going to move on to the USN journal. The USN journal is used by NTFS to keep track of what files are changing in case it gets interrupted in the middle of a file change. Like if you pulled the plug, it'll remember, oh yes, I was modifying this file and I got cut off. That file might be jacked up. You might want to check that, or I might want to try and go back to a previous version of the file if I have volume shadow stuff going on. But it's super awesome because, yes, I would like to know every time the attacker makes changes to files on this disk. That would be super useful. Thank you, NTFS, for offering to record that for me. And what you'll find in the USN journal, particularly it's $J, alternate data stream. I know alternate data streams are scary, but this one's awesome. You'll get the file name, its MFT entry, its MFT entry sequence number, its parent MFT entry, its parent MFT entry sequence number, and that will help you go back and say, I have a file name, I found its MFT entry, and I also know what that MFT entry's parent was, which will correspond to its parent directory. You'll know which folder it was. And every time an MFT entry gets reused, its sequence number increments. So if the sequence numbers don't match, it's likely that that directory no longer exists.
Is this a single journal that's for everything? Or is it different journal files?
So it's just this one file, this one.
It has an alternative data stream that has more information.
So the $USN journal file is, to me, useless. I don't know what it does, but it's alternate data stream $J keeps the useful information. I'm not sure what the other ADSs are for and what the base file is for, but it's this ADS that we like. I don't know why it picks this one over the others. I just know this has the goods. So you'll also hear me say that I don't know a lot of stuff. So keep that in mind when you're like writing reports and have to go to court. Be like, Dave Pany told me this, but he doesn't really know. And you'll see that a lot, and I'll talk about that. Don't worry. But some of the really useful things you'll see, reason flags. There's a whole TechNet article there with all the reasons about why, what things get recorded by the journal and why. Useful things for me are that file gets created, file gets appended to or overwritten, file gets deleted, and file gets renamed. There's all kinds of other ones, like the streams change, the reparse points change. You'll see, every time I write to a file, it'll be opened, you'll get a million appends and then a close. Those are kind of, they're nice to me to know, but if I can tell when a file gets created and deleted and renamed, that's very useful.
When does that data get overwritten or removed?
We're going to talk about that. We will definitely talk about when the file, or how long this data lasts. So there's a blog post here by Corey Harrell. Again, I'm preferential to Willie's parser, usnjournal.py. There's a whole bunch of them. There's, Joachim Schicks, I think his name is. He has a USN to CSV parser. There's all kinds of good ones. I like the Python, but that's not everyone's cup of tea. So this is a case study about how, what kind of information can you get when you parse USN journal. And we'll take a big look at another one. These have a lot of data, right? Think about how often files on your C drive get modified, appended, overwritten, renamed. It's a lot of data. So this case had 400,000 lines. If you use Excel for analysis, there goes about almost half your lines that you can use. You can use 1,048,000 some lines in Excel, and then you're done. So I like to open this and maybe power grep out what I'm looking for, or something. It's a lot of data, so be prepared for that. But in this example, we were looking for hux.exe. We knew that was a bad file name. So, we're going to keyword search for this, or search in our parse journal. And what do you know? We found hux.exe. We can see that it was created at this time, has this MFT reference, and that's where we would look in MFT for its data. Its sequence number is 140, so that's the 140th time that MFT entry has been used. So that seems like a lot to me, but that's cool. But we can also see that its parent MFT record is 624. Does anybody know what that tells me? That's its parent folder. So we see shortly after, Kylo.exe got created in that same folder. Would an attacker use the same folder to hold multiple files? Would a bad guy? Probably. Everyone likes to theorize, oh, the attackers could be super stealthy, use 20 different folders, a whole bunch of file names, but attackers don't want to remember all that crap. Like, it's a lot. They're going to use the same files all the time, same file names all the time, same directories all the time. They do this over and over. We see it every time we see a case with a previously known attacker. It's good for us and convenient for them. So if we look at MFT record 624, that's C Windows. So the attacker was writing it to C Windows, probably had some elevated privileges running as an admin or something to be able to write to that directory. Useful to know. But by looking in the USN journal, we can see that this other file, kylo.exe, was created in that same directory around the same time. We're going to think that it might be bad. Here's an example of what a full parsed USN journal might look like. We can see that Hux and Kylo were created, extended, and then all of a sudden we see kylo.exe renamed from the old name kylo.exe to the new name AAAA.AAA. I'm not calling AAA for my tire to be flat today, so that's a little suspicious to me. Anybody have an inkling of what that represents?
P6 DNS record?
Ooh. Whoa.
I think that's wrong.
Shut up, Andy. Anybody else know? All right, so we're going to talk about that, but keep a note that that 4-letter file name got renamed to 4 letters of A's, 4 letters of B's, and let's come back to this. But that's interesting to note when we see that. And it just keeps getting renamed. And then also later, the whole next day, we look at this same parent directory, 624. We can find that a file named test was created, file psexec.exe was created. Anybody know what psexec is? It's a file that you can use to connect to another system and execute a command or an application. If you use psexec to run cmd.exe on a remote system, you have just SSH to that system. Congratulations. It took me like 4 years to figure out how can I just open a command line on another system. If you just run psexec, system name, username, password, cmd.exe, it'll just let you SSH to that system, which is very nice. Okay, we're good on time. So, what are my thoughts about journaling? Number one, that $J file is huge. Man, that sucker can be big. Usually it's a gig or so. I've seen them like 16 gigabytes. How do I copy this out on my stupid MacBook? Like, I can't possibly do this. They're gigantic. And not only are they gigantic, they're really sparse. Like, only a small portion of that giant file is used for any information and is useful. So if you copy this file and try and parse it, you're going to have a tough time. It's going to take forever. So what I've been doing a lot recently is I found this tool, also by Joaquin Schick, that extract USN journal. You can run it on a raw or maybe an E01. I forget what file types are supported. I just mount it with FTK Imager and say, hey, tool, look at this mounted volume and extract the USN journal. And it like opens it up somehow, looks in the journal, and only pulls out the useful data, so you don't have to worry about copying out the giant files, because sometimes USN journal is like 16 gigabytes. That's huge. But you can pull that out. The other question, entries expire frequently. So the best I've ever seen for USN journal on a C drive is like 2 or 3 days. Remember, your C drive is like updating registry files, updating system files. It's got applications, antiviruses, doing all kinds of crazy stuff with files. Everything running is going to add entries to your USN journal. So on your C drive, man, if you don't catch that quick, it's going to be tough to have information useful in there. Where I have found useful is when the attacker does something on like a data drive or a D drive. Those USN journals get used a lot less frequently. They'll last for months. So that's very useful.
Does it expire if the file is still there, or does it only expire when a file is deleted?
So the journal entries have nothing to do if the file is deleted or anything. It just is a log that goes and...
So if the file hasn't been touched for a while, it would be pushed out of the journal by other entities?
Correct, yeah. So if that file hasn't been modified or deleted or renamed recently, you probably won't see it on the operating system drive. But there's a chance it will be there. And even better, talking about keyword search hits, you may find deleted entries in unallocated drive space. Why they're not just in the rest of the unused USN journal file itself, I don't know. Why is the USN journal like fragmented all over the place? Like the MFT, I'm pretty sure, is a consistent block of clusters that always gets used. The USN journal seems to put stuff here, put stuff there. You'll have keyword search hits for files that were deleted a long time ago in unallocated space. Very strange. But check your keywords. And this is what a keyword search hit looks like, along with a self-promotion of my Twitter account. I saw this one time. I was like, what the heck is this? And I had a file name. So the example here is file name is rs file, and you'll see this less than sign. And right around that, you'll probably see a lot of other less than signs with other files. And I was like, what is this? And I found out that that was a deleted USN journal entry. So if you find like the structure of the USN journal, you can go and figure out what all those bytes and hex codes mean and stuff. So if you go back 28 characters before the file name, that's the timestamp the entry was created. So I know at this time, Wednesday, August 3rd, 2016, something with that file happened. I'd have to parse the rest of them to know if it was renamed, deleted. I'm not that smart. I just got excited to see that hit and thought it was worth sharing. But if you can do that, that's good stuff. Any questions on USN Journal? Okay. All right. No problem. So special use case here, SDELETE. So remember those AAA, BBB, CCC, DDD? That was actually an artifact of a utility being run called SDELETE. And SDELETE is a free sysinternals tool. I know everyone loves to talk about the sysinternals tools. It's one of the more useful ones for attackers, just similar to PSExec, in that it's a secure deletion utility. So when you run SDELETE on a file, it's going to overwrite the file name 26 times. It's going to, however many characters it was, it's going to convert them all to A's, all to B's, all to C's, all the way through Z. Same with the extension. And it's also going to overwrite the contents of the file a bunch of times. I don't know if it's 35 or configurable or whatever. I'm not sure. But it's going to make it really, really tough to recover that file. Luckily, though, when we see a file named ZZZ, I'm pretty sure no one was sleeping on the keyboard when they named that file. It's probably secure delete, and we can often find evidence of that. So it's very scary because, you know, oh man, Dave, you're telling me that all this crap is gone? It's okay. Have no fear. SDELETE leaves behind some artifacts that are useful. Number one, if we see files named Z or keyword search hits for a bunch of Z's or A's or B's, that's good news. It tells us that someone tried to use SDELETE. I think CCleaner will also do this stuff. But whenever you run a sysinternals tool, it asks you to accept the license agreement, the EULA. So if you look in the registry, you'll be able to see if the user accepted the EULA, because it'll save it, say, yeah, this guy already accepted it, or girl, and next time I won't ask. So you'll see that sysinternals registry key there. And keep in mind, it's in the ntuser.dat registry key, which we can tie to a specific user account. So if the attacker compromises multiple accounts, we know which accounts they used. This is an insane regex that I had an idea for but didn't create because I don't understand it. You might not want to try and sign that. That's going to be brutal. But basically it looks for, I think, 3 letters followed by a dot and then 3 of the same letters. So that'll help you find A's through Z's, all kinds of good stuff. It's very complicated. I don't get how it works. I think it still works. But you'll want to look for those. That's the good stuff. Another artifact that you'll see is the $log file. I don't use this one as much as I do the USN journal. Maybe I should start. But it's very similar. It records file changes, and that file's word change. It'll record a little bit more information, I think, than the USN journal, but it's kind of the same thing. For some reason, this log file seems to store 32,000 entries before it rolls. Definitely worth parsing. There are all kinds of CSV type file, or parsers that'll convert it to a CSV for you to analyze. And it'll give you very similar information. What was the file name? What happened to it? And is there any more information about that? So just another NTFS artifact when files are created and modified and accessed about what's happening, where you can find it, in case that file is deleted. Any questions about files that, artifacts that get created when files are created? Yes? Gotcha. So the comment was about attackers changing the maximum size of log files to hide their evidence. I've personally never come across that. I'm sure it happens. The USN journal, I don't know how to change the max record count. I know there's an FS util command that'll change the file size. I've never seen an attacker do that. That I've dealt with. Not saying it doesn't happen, but certainly like Windows event logs, yeah, they'll do that. And I don't see attackers that I deal with change the event log sizes, but they'll clear it. they'll just say, let's take all the events in there that I just made and delete them, which leaves behind an event log saying this event log has been cleared, so that's useful. The event logs are gone, but they were there at a certain time. But yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of anti-forensic activities you can take to mess some of this stuff up. We're recovering a lot of batch scripts of attackers creating like MRU keys and user assist keys and shell bags. Like they know about it because I'm up here talking about it, I guess. So that's okay. Keeps me in the hunt. Any other questions? Got about 10 minutes, so we're going to go. These are some artifacts about files that get created when files get accessed or modified by a user or executed or accessed by an application. CCM recently used apps. This is a really useful artifact that is enabled in an enterprise where the IT team is using SCCM, which is like a built-in Microsoft management application where they can install software and install updates and stuff, get an inventory of all their assets, but they can also turn on this feature called software metering. And all that does is say, let's keep track of all the applications that are running because I want to know, are people using the expensive software we pay for? Are they, using applications they're not supposed to be using, such as what attackers do, I guess? And so all this data, I assume, gets saved up, and hey, what application's running? It gets sent to their main server where I assume they run diagnostics and analytics on it. I don't know. But it does leave behind some really cool host-based artifacts that you can find from a keyword search. If you search in this example for SDELETE.exe across the drive, you may have a keyword hit that's followed, that's following the keyword CCM recently used apps. This functionality seems to store these logs in the Windows WMI repo. It's a bit complicated. WMI is like Windows Management Instrumentation or something that controls lots of stuff on Windows. That's very complicated. But these SCCM software metering logs store their like host-based logs in this repository, and I'll have the paths for you. Again, it's probably only enterprise only, so if you're working in law enforcement, you may not come across this as much. But you'll have keyword search hits there, and you'll also see things like 2015-07-24. That's a date and a timestamp. That sounds pretty cool. What the heck is that? Let's take a look. So here we have all these fields that are recovered, and on the previous slide I had a little blurb that said they can either be, all these fields are delimited by 2 null bytes, or that's a cool XML structure that tells you what the fields are. It's very useful. But you'll have company name, file description, last used time, very useful, last user name, very useful, and a launch count, so how many times this ran, similar to like user assist. The WMI repository is stored in the objects.data file, varies on Vista and XP. Some guy wrote a blog post trashing my parser on this. He said he couldn't get to run. I don't know what the deal was, but he said that he finds these repositories in other spaces sometimes. Just look for the file name objects.data. I don't know where the file is. Just make an ncase file name filter. You'll find it. We also have keyword search hits in this inventory store.sdf file, which is a compact SQL database that you have to extract. So Brandon Schondorf, you guys may know him, he wrote a tool that extracts it for me, and then I look for the keywords. But sometimes you'll have decompressed keywords in there. So it's about to get a little technical. So C3PO is pretty upset. We talked about file version, company name. Where does all that stuff come from? So in an executable file, it has a header, and in that header, it keeps track of some of this information, like who's the author, what's the version, what's the compile timestamp. Some of that information gets recorded in here. This is all of that information just parsed out into a CSV file. Most legitimate files are going to have that header information. That's going to be the company, the author, the user. So if you look at this spreadsheet, besides the bright yellow, what stands out? To me, it's the lack of information in some of the entries. So, SDELETE is a real tool. That's created by Microsoft. It has a company name, has file description, file version. Same with rar.exe, which attackers use to make archives of their files and extract files. But Adobe ARM, Chrome.exe, PWGrab, and 5442.exe, those don't have that information, which tells me either someone like myself who's really terrible at coding wrote it, or someone who doesn't care about version numbers or is trying not to, create a signature. Because if they put this was made by Russia, that's going to be a pretty easy to find. So the lack of that information will stand out. Also, all these files are created in ctemp. They'll all have a user account name that can be useful to us, and the last used timestamp can be pretty useful. It's one of my favorite artifacts to find. Actually, I have a blog post on it that, do you see what I see? They cut the M off at the end of the URL, I don't know, whatever. And I have a parser that you can run on an object.data file. It'll pull this stuff out. No dependencies required. Super easy to run. If you like going crazy with Linux virtual machines, you can install our FireEye Labs Advanced Reverse Engineering utility Python sim, which is a little bit of work to get it set up, but that'll actually open up the repository. I'm just carving them out like kind of ghetto, so it's fun. FileSystemFiles is another pretty much the exact same artifact that I've seen stored in there. I don't know why they're stored in there. I haven't really figured this stuff out. There goes Dave. He doesn't really know what he's talking about it again. But there's a TechNet article that just describes, this is just files that are created, and WMI records that they exist. So you'll see these in keyword search hits. Luckily, this is an XML-based format, like we mentioned, so it'll tell you exactly what the fields are. You won't have to guess. It'll tell you in their product language, what the name of the file is, the size, product version. Very useful. Here's just a list of the fields. You won't get that last user time, so I don't want to say that these files have been executed because I don't know. They're just, they're present on the system at some point in time. You may get a size, a path. A size can be almost as useful as a hash sometimes if you have the same file name and the same file size. Maybe it's you can make some assumptions, but you're ready to back that up. And the data is stored in the same place. Next up, we have Windows Defender, APT29 case study. Anybody familiar with Windows Defender? It's like Microsoft antivirus. It's built in, and it's getting pretty good. Microsoft's Advanced Threat Protection, their ATP, not the APT, is actually getting really, really good. It's going to be used commercially to detect anomalies and stop attackers in their tracks. It's pretty cool stuff. But Windows Defender is built in to almost every version of Windows. Workstation should have it enabled by default. Enterprise, and I think at home users as well. Servers, it might not be running. Super bad job at detecting or at stopping APT29. It's just like, I guess I'm not going to stop you. But it did a great job scanning the files. I mean, it did scan them and told me that it scanned them. It just forgot to stop them. You can find the Defender log file in this path with a date before, the dotted dots are going to be a date. And Microsoft Anti-Malware is the same kind of thing, but a little different. Not sure if one's newer, one's better. I don't know. But they have, the same kind of log file that you can find there. So I had a keyword search hit for, and we looked at this earlier, 5442.exe. Attempt path, that doesn't look so good. That was actually because they executed out of an email. It was a phishing email that they double-clicked and made it an attempt directory, and then they ran this. They thought it was a zip file or something. But it says, I'm going to scan this file at this time. File count, I'm only scanning one. I thought there was something else useful. I guess that's all we need to know. Maybe the PID of the process that's running. But I know at this time that file was present on the system. I don't know if it was executing. Doesn't tell me it was bad, but I know it was on the system at that point in time. So that's very useful. Yep. But yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So it's probably running. It's got that process ID. So we know all that good stuff. So I thought, let's scroll. It's just a text file. Let's scroll around and see what else we can find. There's got to be other stuff. I was pretty psyched. I think General Grievous is one of the coolest Star Wars guys, because who doesn't wish they had 4 lightsabers? But we look shortly after that. Oh, sorry, I thought it was on the next slide, but it was just Mr. Lightsabers. So I scrolled around and I saw, look at these other files that are in ctemp. SDELETE, we know that's bad. Chrome.exe, maybe you can browse your internet out of the temp directory. I don't know. PW grab, probably a password grabber, or I don't know. And they were all created or scanned. Sorry, they were all scanned around the same time. So I'm thinking these are all attacker utilities that Windows Defender thought were, I guess, okay. SDELETE, of course, is a legitimate file. itinventory.vbs was not. And we knew that this Adobe ARM.exe file name was bad from before, But Windows Defender did a great job telling me that all these files were present on the system at some point in time. Han Solo was super impressed at this. And then Chewbacca was even more impressed when I wrote a parser that just pulled out all that text and said, this is the scan start time, this is the resource path of the file name, and we could do this in Excel all day long. It was good stuff. So that's my fun with the Windows Defender. We still have some time going on, I think. So let's talk about the application compatibility cache. This has been around for a while. I think Mandy has a blog post or a white paper that came out in 2012, 2013. But basically, whenever you like try and install an old file like Roller Coaster Tycoon, the original, I've done that recently, like my favorite. Now they have an iPad app, so great. But Windows says, is this version of Windows going to be able to run this application? And it'll say, you may want to reinstall this with compatibility settings, whatever. When it does that check, it looks for any gaps or issues, and then it tries to like shim the code up. For anyone who's not familiar with what a shim is, it's a little piece of wood that you put like in like a window to make it fit better. Same kind of thing. They're putting little shims of code in there to help it run. Depending on the operating system, it'll keep track of file path, file size, last modified time, not execution time, whether or not it was executed. You may or may not have this flag depending on your operating system version, and you may get a file created timestamp, but I don't really see that. I don't care about their registry path. It's in the system hive. Extract the system registry hive and run Mandy and Shim Cache parser on it, and you'll get the good stuff that you need. Here's what it looks like, kind of. It'll give you the last modified timestamp. There's just a copy of the standard information last modified timestamp. That is not the time the file was added to the shim cache. Keep that in mind. People will say, this file executed on 8/24. No, it did not. It was added to the shim cache, it's not the time it was added to the shim cache. That's when that file was last modified on disk. It'll just kind of roll through the logs again. It'll put the oldest stuff at the bottom. So OB1 executed, or we have our execution flag here. OB1 executed, Anakin executed, then Biggs, then Porkins, all that good stuff. Keep in mind, it's only written to the registry when the operating system shuts down. And if you get there before the operating system shuts down, you have to get a memory image and then run shimcache mem plugin, which a couple of our guys wrote and is really great. Almost done. I know it's lunchtime. Oh, it's lunchtime. I can hold you guys all day. That's fine. Just kidding. So Windows Prefetch. I know Windows Prefetch is taught here, so hopefully some of you guys have seen it. Depending on the operating system, I think it'll store a different number of files or records, but it'll keep track of when a file executes, what were the files it used within 10 seconds that it probably loaded data from. That way it knows where to find them next time. Keep in mind it's disabled by default on Windows servers, so if someone like hacks your domain controller or something, you're not going to have this artifact on there most likely. And that's because it's used to speed, when applications start and when the system reboots. And servers don't really reboot. They're pretty stable, hopefully. There's a whole bunch of parsers. I like the Well-aware one. Here's another one that's good. But it'll tell you the name of the executable, a little hash that will be unique to that file's path. So if I ran phasma.exe out of C Windows and then I ran it out of C, I'm going to have two entries with two different hash values there. It'll give you the time that it last ran. The prefetch file itself, the .pf file's creation time will be when that file first ran, hopefully. You think when it first runs, it'll create this prefetch time. It'll give you the number of times it ran, and then it'll also give you a list of all the files that it touched within 10 seconds. So if a first stage of malware or a virus runs and then downloads additional files and runs them, you'll see those in the access file list. All kinds of good stuff. It's another good artifact. Any questions about these artifacts before I start ranting, aka final thoughts? So all these artifacts were found basically all by keyword searching for known bad file names and moving around and doing the research to back them up. So there's so many more artifacts from different antivirus vendors and software and all kinds of stuff. Keep in mind, you'll never know what you'll find. And if you find something that no one has found before, you're going to have to figure out what it means. You can't just say, I found this keyword. I guess it means they're guilty. Like, it doesn't quite work like that. So always research your keyword hits when you run them. Dig around, ask people on Twitter, find someone who may know about these types of artifacts and ask them. Always learn, look at other presentations here, follow webinars. There's so many artifacts, I can't possibly keep them all straight myself, let alone tell people about the ones I think I know. Be adaptable. Attackers are sneaky. They're going to try and delete their artifacts. They're going to, try and thwart your detection mechanisms. And then a little more thoughts. It's, this is part art, part science, right? A lot of this stuff I researched myself, and if you're going to trust my blog post on CCM Recently's apps, good luck, but I take it as much as you would trust any other blog post. Unfortunately, the proof is just someone testing this stuff out in their spare time, or a researcher who's getting paid. We're lucky enough if we can get a white paper or a book that really goes into detail, but I've tried to ask Microsoft, how does this work? They've never actually told me, like, yes, that's exactly how Amcache works. I just tweeted at them the other day. No one's ever been able to get a straight answer out of Microsoft to say, in court, yes, Microsoft confirmed this is how it works. It's all somebody reverse engineered this and tried to figure it out. So things may change, but keep in mind and be prepared for litigation. I'm a big fan of putting the word likely in a report. The attacker likely had this going on. Like, it's because you don't always know, and you don't want to be caught saying something happened for sure. So, we look for all this evidence. Luke Skywalker's hiding out somewhere near Ireland on that big island. If you didn't see that movie yet, that's too bad. So, yeah, my name's Dave Pany. I work for Mandiant. I drive a Kia. That's my Twitter. And does anybody have any questions? Yes?
Sounds like you do a lot with timestamps. That's a lot of what you're talking about. I'm curious if you have any experience working with a case where someone used a timestamp scrambler.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what.
So the technical, or the question was about messing with timestamps, and the technical term is timestamp. It's not super, so like modifying timestamps, and absolutely, it's very easy to, well, there are tools that will go out there and modify your timestamps and your MFT entries, both standard info and file name. It used to be that you couldn't modify your file name timestamps, but now people just say, I'm going to get raw disk access and change them, kind of risky, kind of not. Modifying timestamps, like in the USN journal or other logs, might be tricky. They might not know about them, so that's why I enjoy it when I can get those. But yeah, attackers do try and timestamp file timestamps as part of anti-forensics techniques. Any other questions? I know it's lunchtime. I'll be here if you guys want to chat. I'll be around tonight, tomorrow. So come up and ask me questions. Stop by the probably unattended FireEye booth downstairs. I think Brandon's there. I don't really know. There's a bunch of free stuff. Please take it because that means it's less weight we have to pay to ship back. So take anything on the table except the tablecloth. So thank you guys very much.